Kithara's six eyes watched the holographic display with growing despair. Red dots marked another fallen world. The Vorth had taken 3 more Zalani colonies in just 2 days. Each red dot represented millions of her people, now dead or enslaved. Elder, the Defense Fleet reports complete loss of contact with Saren Prime, announced Navigation Officer Yeldan. His normally green skin had turned pale yellow with fear. The orbital stations went silent 4 hours ago. Kithara's long fingers traced mathematical equations in the air, a nervous habit from her youth. Numbers had always brought her comfort. But no equation could solve this problem. The Vorth Imperium was simply too strong. The crystalline beings had appeared at the edge of Zalani space 6 months ago. Their ships looked like floating cathedrals made of living glass. Beautiful but deadly. When the Zalani had tried peaceful contact, the Vorth response was swift and brutal. They wanted planets, not conversation. "How many worlds have we lost?" Kithara asked, though she already knew the answer. 17 confirmed, destroyed. 8 more under attack. "The Vorth are moving faster than our evacuation ships." Yeldan's voice cracked. His own family lived on one of the threatened worlds. The Elder looked around the emergency council chamber. 23 species made up the Zalani Confederation. All of them were peaceful beings. Farmers, scientists, artists, and philosophers. None of them were warriors. Their greatest achievement was the grand equation that predicted stellar movements for the next 1,000,000 years. But equations could not stop plasma cannons. "What about the Galactic Council?" asked Dr. Nethiel, the chief scientist. "Surely they will help us." Kithara's expression grew bitter. "The Council has been reviewing our situation for 3 months. They send thoughts and prayers, not ships. The other species fear the Vorth too much to act." The truth was painful. The Zalani had always been proud of their peaceful nature. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of organized violence. Their philosophy taught that all problems could be solved through understanding and mathematics. The universe was logical. Reasonable beings could always find peaceful solutions. The Vorth had proven this philosophy wrong in the most brutal way possible. "Elder," whispered Communications Officer Hexara, "there is one option we have not discussed." All eyes turned to her. The young Zalani seemed nervous, her forearms fidgeting with her control panel. "Speak," Kithara commanded. "The precursor beacon, the one in the deep archives." Silence filled the chamber. Every Zalani knew about the beacon. It was a relic from the ancient precursor civilization that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. The precursors had left behind many mysteries, but this device was well understood. It was an emergency transmitter that could send messages across the entire galaxy instantly. "The beacon has not been activated in over 50,000 years, Dr. Nethiel said slowly. "We do not even know if it still works." "More importantly," added Elder Fethrin, the oldest member of the council, "activating it would call for outside military intervention. That goes against everything we believe in." Kithara stared at the red dots on the display. 18 worlds now. The Vorth were not slowing down. "Our beliefs will not matter if we are all dead," she said quietly. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members argued that using the beacon would betray their peaceful principles. Others claimed that survival was more important than philosophy. The debate continued for an hour while more reports came in of Vorth attacks. Finally, Kithara stood. Her ancient voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. "I am the eldest of our kind. I have lived through 3 stellar cycles and seen the rise and fall of 6 civilizations. I have spent my life believing that peace and understanding could solve any problem." She paused, looking at each council member. "I was wrong." The elder walked to the central display and placed her hand on the activation panel. The beacon was left by the precursors for exactly this situation. When a species faces complete extinction and cannot save itself, if we die here, our philosophy dies with us. If we live, we can rebuild and perhaps find a better way to survive in this violent galaxy. With trembling fingers, she began entering the activation codes. The ancient Zalani language appeared on the screen as she typed the distress message. "Urgent. Request peaceful intervention. The Zalani Confederation faces complete extinction at the hands of the Vorth Imperium. We are a peaceful species with no military capability. Please, any civilization capable of providing defensive assistance, we beg for your help." She hesitated before pressing the final activation key. Once the message was sent, there would be no taking it back. The peaceful Zalani would be calling for war. "Forgive us," she whispered to the memory of her ancestors. Cathara pressed the key. The beacon hummed to life. Ancient precursor technology awakened after millennia of sleep. Energy patterns that defied modern understanding began building within the device. The message was encoded into quantum particles and prepared for instant transmission across hyperspace. But the beacon was old. Very old. And space near the Zilani homeworld was not the same as it had been 50,000 years ago. A neutron star had wandered into the local area, creating massive gravitational distortions. Quantum interference from the star's magnetic field began affecting the beacon's transmission matrix. The carefully crafted message began to change as it passed through the interference. Words shifted, meanings altered. The phrase, "request peaceful intervention," became garbled by quantum static. What emerged from the beacon and spread across the galaxy was very different from what Cathara had intended. The message that reached thousands of civilizations read, "Urgent, request maximum intervention." In the Zilani language, this was merely confusing, but translated into other tongues, those three words carried a very different meaning. In the military codes of one particular species on the galaxy's outer rim, "request maximum intervention" was an ancient phrase with a specific definition. It meant, "send everything you have." The beacon's transmission reached the edge of charted space and beyond, carrying its altered message to civilizations the Zilani had never heard of. Most species that received it would debate and discuss before taking any action. Democratic councils and peaceful societies would spend weeks deciding how to respond, but one species would not debate. They had been shaped by a world that killed the weak and rewarded the strong. Their evolution had been forged in violence, and their society had been built on the principle that when someone called for help, you answered with overwhelming force. The humans received the message while most of their fleet was scattered across their territory, hunting down the last remnants of their recent enemies. They had just finished a war that had tested their limits and proven their strength. Their ships were battle-tested, their crews were experienced, and their resolve was unshakable. When Captain Sarah Chen read the translated message on her bridge display, she did not hesitate. She reached for her communications panel and sent a priority signal to Earth Command. "This is Captain Chen of the TDF Indomitable. We have received a Code 7 distress call, requesting immediate fleet mobilization under Protocol 7 authority." The response came back within minutes. Authorization granted. "All available ships are to respond with maximum force. The Deathworlders are coming." Cathara sat in her council chamber, unaware that her desperate gamble had just summoned the most dangerous species in the galaxy. She had asked for peaceful intervention, and instead called forth humanity's war machine. The Vorth were about to learn what happened when you threatened something the humans decided to protect. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TDF Indomitable, watching the tactical display with practiced eyes. The massive dreadnought was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, built from lessons learned during the brutal war with the cybernetic hegemony. Its armor could withstand direct hits from antimatter weapons, and its guns could crack planets. "Captain, we're receiving that strange transmission again," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. "The signal is getting stronger as we approach the source." Sarah nodded. 3 days had passed since the emergency beacon had reached human space. The message was unlike anything in their databases. The quantum signature was ancient, using technology that predated known galactic civilizations by millions of years. "Play it again." "Rodriguez." The bridge speakers crackled with the translated message, "Urgent, request maximum intervention." Those 3 words had triggered the largest military mobilization in human history. When the translation computers had processed the signal, alarms had sounded across every human world. Maximum intervention was not a phrase any species used lightly. In human military doctrine, it meant total existential threat. It meant send everything that could fly, fight, or explode. Admiral Marcus Torres had not hesitated. Within 6 hours of receiving the signal, Protocol 7 was active across human space. Hidden shipyards began launching vessels that had been kept in secret reserve. Military commanders pulled their best crews from leave and assigned them to ships that officially did not exist. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's Black Operations Division, received activation codes that had not been used since the Hegemony War. "Captain," called out Navigation Officer Kim, "long-range sensors are detecting multiple energy signatures ahead. Unknown vessel configurations. Sarah moved to the sensor station. The display showed several dozen contacts moving in formation. The ships were unlike anything in human databases. They appeared to be made of crystalline materials that reflected sensor beams in unusual patterns. Analysis? She asked. The vessels appear to be using some form of directed energy weapons, very sophisticated technology, but the power signatures are lower than our plasma cannons. Hull composition appears to be grown rather than manufactured. Sarah frowned. Grown hulls meant biological or semi-biological technology. The humans had encountered similar designs during their exploration of the galaxy's outer rim. Most organic shipbuilders were peaceful species that valued beauty over function. "Sir," Rodriguez interrupted, "I'm detecting massive debris fields in this system, multiple planets showing signs of recent bombardment. Whatever sent that distress call is under heavy attack." The tactical display updated as more sensor data came in. 3 planets in the system showed the unmistakable signs of orbital bombardment. Cities reduced to glass craters, atmosphere partially burned away. Millions, possibly billions dead. Sarah's expression hardened. She had seen similar devastation during the Hegemony War. Civilian populations targeted deliberately. Entire worlds turned into examples for others who might resist. Rodriguez tried to establish contact with the unknown vessels. "Standard first contact protocols." "Aye, Captain. Broadcasting on all frequencies." The response came quickly. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike any in human databases. It appeared to be made of living crystal, with faceted surfaces that reflected light in rainbow patterns. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with grinding stone. "Unknown vessel, you are entering Imperium space without authorization. I am Fleet Commander Zexthul of the Vorth Imperium. State your business or be destroyed." Sarah stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. Years of military service had taught her to project confidence even when facing the unknown. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We received a distress call requesting maximum intervention. Are you the species that sent the signal?" The crystalline being's expression shifted, patterns of light playing across its faceted face. "Terrans? I am not familiar with your species. And no, we did not send any distress call. We are engaged in legitimate expansion activities. The local primitives have been conquered according to standard Imperium protocol." "Conquered?" Sarah's voice grew cold. "The signal we received indicated an existential threat to an entire civilization. Are you telling me you've been wiping out the species that called for help?" Zexthul's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "The Zelani are weak herbivores with no military capability. They exist now only to serve Imperium needs. If someone called for help, it was pointless. No force in this sector can stand against our fleets." Sarah looked at her tactical officer. "Commander Hayes, how many Vorth ships in the area?" 47 capital ships, Captain. Multiple smaller vessels. Total fleet strength approximately 60,000 crew members. And our response force?" Hayes smiled grimly. "First wave includes 12 dreadnoughts, 36 heavy cruisers, and over 200 support vessels. The second wave launches in 18 hours with twice that number. Admiral Torres is bringing the entire 5th Fleet." Sarah turned back to the view screen. "Commander Zexthul, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw from this system and release any prisoners you've taken. The species that sent the distress call is now under Terran protection." The Vorth commander's crystalline structure flared with bright light. "You dare threaten the Imperium?" "Your primitive ships are no match for Vorth technology. We have conquered 17 worlds in this sector alone. Commander Hayes, launch a sensor probe toward the nearest Vorth vessel. Let's get detailed scans of their technology." "Probe away, Captain." On the view screen, Zexthul's expression changed as his sensors detected the human probe approaching. Without warning, a beam of coherent energy lanced out from the Vorth flagship and destroyed the small device. "That was a mistake," Sarah said quietly. In human military doctrine, destroying a reconnaissance probe was considered an act of war. It indicated hostile intent and justified immediate defensive action. The fact that the Vorth had fired first would be recorded in the ship's logs and transmitted to Earth Command. "All stations, battle alert. Weapons online, shields up. Rodriguez, contact Admiral Torres and inform him that first contact protocols have failed. We are now in active engagement with hostile forces." "Captain," Hayes reported, "the Vorth fleet is moving to surround us. They're trying to cut off our escape route." Sarah almost laughed. "Escape route?" The Vorth clearly did not understand what they were dealing with. Humans did not retreat when facing an enemy that targeted civilians. The destruction of those planets had changed this from a rescue mission to something much more serious. Haze. Target their flagship. Full spread of kinetic rounds. Show them what human weapons can do. The Indomitable's main guns rotated toward the Vorth command ship. Electromagnetic launchers charged with power drawn from the ship's fusion reactors. When they fired, the tungsten projectiles accelerated to a significant percentage of light speed. The Vorth had expected energy weapons. Their crystalline hulls were designed to deflect and absorb directed energy attacks, but kinetic rounds were different. Simple chunks of metal moving at enormous velocity, carrying enough force to shatter mountains. The first salvo struck the Vorth flagship along its central axis. The beautiful crystalline hull cracked and shattered. Atmosphere vented into space in glittering clouds of frozen air. The elegant ship that had looked like a floating cathedral now resembled a broken glass sculpture. Direct hits, Captain. Their hull appears to be highly vulnerable to kinetic weapons. On the view screen, Zexthul's image flickered as his ship's power systems fluctuated. Impossible. Your weapons should not be able to penetrate Imperium armor. Commander, Sarah replied calmly, you made two mistakes. First, you attacked innocent civilians. Second, you fired on a Terran vessel. My species has a saying, fuck around and find out. You've done the first part. Now comes the second. The Vorth fleet began moving toward the human ship's energy weapons charging. They still believed they were facing another peaceful species like the Zilani. They had no understanding of what humans were or where they came from. Captain, Rodriguez called out. I'm receiving a transmission from the surviving Zilani. They're asking if we're here to help them. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The odds were roughly even in terms of ship numbers, but she knew something the Vorth did not. Humans had been fighting wars since before they learned to farm. Every aspect of their technology, tactics, and psychology had been shaped by millions of years of evolutionary warfare. Rodriguez, send a message to the Zilani. Tell them the cavalry has arrived. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries, not because it was close, but because it demonstrated the fundamental difference between a species that had evolved for peace and one that had been forged in violence. The Vorth fought with elegant formations and sophisticated energy weapons. Their tactics were based on intimidation and overwhelming technological superiority. They had never faced an enemy that hit back harder. The humans fought like the apex predators they were. Their ships moved in patterns that maximized damage while minimizing exposure. Their weapons were crude but devastatingly effective. Most importantly, they fought with a ferocity that the peaceful Vorth could not comprehend. Admiral Marcus Torres stood in the command center of the TDF Leviathan, watching the holographic display that showed the growing human fleet. In just 48 hours, more ships had assembled in Zilani space than most species could build in a century. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers, and support vessels stretched across the system in a formation that spoke of disciplined military power. Admiral, reported Fleet Intelligence Officer Commander Park, we've completed our analysis of the Vorth military structure. They operate with a strict hierarchy and appear to have no experience fighting an enemy of equal technological capability. Torres nodded, his scarred face showing no emotion. The left side of his head bore the marks of hegemony plasma weapons from the war that had ended just 2 years ago. That conflict had taught humanity valuable lessons about fighting technologically superior enemies, lessons the Vorth were about to learn the hard way. What about the species they've been attacking? The Zilani? Fascinating people, sir. They're mathematical geniuses and philosophers. Their technology is highly advanced in some areas, particularly space navigation and communication. But they have absolutely no military capability, none. They don't even have a word for weapon in their language. Torres looked at the tactical display showing Zilani refugee ships, fleeing their devastated worlds. Millions of beings packed into vessels never designed for mass evacuation. Families torn apart, children orphaned, entire cultures erased by Vorth bombardments. How many worlds have the Vorth destroyed? 23 confirmed, sir. Another dozen under active attack. Intelligence estimates they've killed approximately 800 million Zilani civilians. The Admiral's expression hardened. During the Hegemony War, humanity had developed very specific rules about protecting civilian populations. Any enemy that deliberately targeted non-combatants was to be dealt with using maximum force. No mercy, No negotiation, complete destruction of military capability. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Lieutenant Chen, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorth Fleet. They're requesting a ceasefire to discuss terms. On screen, the hologram flickered to life, showing Fleet Commander Zexthul, the crystalline being looked much less confident than during the first encounter. His ship bore visible damage, and several of his escort vessels were missing entirely. Admiral Torres, I presume. I am Zexthul of the Vorth Imperium. I believe there has been a misunderstanding between our species. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that benefits both our peoples. Torres stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. Commander, the only arrangement I'm interested in is your immediate withdrawal from Zalani space and the return of all prisoners. That is not possible. The Imperium has invested significant resources in this expansion. These worlds are now part of our territory by right of conquest. However, we are willing to discuss compensation for any inconvenience this may have caused your species. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Around the command center, his staff waited for his response. They had served with Torres long enough to recognize the signs. The tightness around his eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders. The man who had broken the hegemony siege of Earth was about to make a decision that would change galactic history. Commander Zexthul, let me explain something about humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us for millions of years. Gravity that crushed the weak. Weather that froze or burned anything that couldn't adapt. Predators that hunted in packs and never gave up. We survived because we learned to fight harder, run faster, and hit back with overwhelming force. Torres gestured to the tactical display. Every ship you see here was built by a species that considers warfare to be problem-solving. We don't negotiate with beings who slaughter civilians. We eliminate them. Zexthul's crystalline structure flared with agitation. You cannot threaten the Imperium. We rule over 40 star systems and command the most powerful fleet in this sector. Had, Torres corrected quietly. You had the most powerful fleet. Commander Park, show him the updated tactical analysis. The display changed to show the positions of both fleets. The Vorth formation looked impressive until the computer highlighted the damage assessments. Nearly 60% of their ships showed significant structural damage from the initial engagement. Several capital ships were operating on emergency power. Your fleet is crippled, Commander. My forces have barely begun to fight, but I'm going to give you one chance to do this the easy way. Withdraw all forces from Zalani space immediately. Release any prisoners. Submit to inspection of your ships to ensure compliance. And if we refuse? Torres smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you'll discover why every species that has ever fought humanity has learned to regret it. The transmission ended as Zexthul cut the connection. Within minutes, the Vorth fleet began moving into attack formation. Their remaining ships spread out across space, energy weapons charging for what they hoped would be a decisive strike. Admiral, reported Tactical Officer Commander Hayes, Vorth fleet is advancing. They appear to be concentrating their remaining firepower for a massive alpha strike. Predictable. They're still thinking like bullies. Hit hard and fast, expect the enemy to collapse. Torres turned to his communications station. Signal all ships, implement Battle Plan Omega. No survivors among military targets. What happened next would be analyzed by military academies for generations. The Vorth attacked with elegant precision, their energy weapons creating beautiful patterns of destruction across space. Their tactics were flawless according to their own military doctrine. But human military doctrine had been written by a species that fought dirty. The first surprise came when the Vorth energy beams struck the human fleet. The humans had studied the earlier engagement carefully and adjusted their defensive systems accordingly. Ablative armor and energy dissipation fields absorbed most of the damage. Ships that should have been destroyed simply shrugged off the attacks and kept fighting. The second surprise came when the humans fired back. Instead of the expected energy weapons, the human ships launched clouds of kinetic projectiles. Thousands of tungsten rods accelerated to tremendous velocity by electromagnetic launchers. The Vorth point defense systems, designed to stop energy attacks, were almost useless against simple chunks of metal. Moving at near light speed, the beautiful, crystalline Vorth ships began shattering like glass, sculptures hit by hammers. But the real shock came when the humans did, something no civilized species had attempted in recorded galactic history. Instead of maintaining proper formation and fighting at a respectful distance, the human ships began ramming. The TDF Wolverine, a heavy cruiser that had already taken significant damage, turned directly toward the Vorth flagship and engaged its emergency thrusters. Captain Rodriguez had calculated that his ship was too damaged to survive the battle anyway. Rather than let his crew die slowly, he chose to make their deaths count. The Wolverine struck Zexthol's command ship at nearly 10% of light speed. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away. "All ships," Torres broadcast calmly. "You are authorized to use ramming attacks against targets of opportunity. Make every shot count." This was warfare as the Vorth had never imagined it. The humans fought like the predators they were, accepting losses that would have broken any other species' morale. When their weapons ran out, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were crippled, they turned them into bombs. Dr. Nethial, the Zelani scientist who had suggested activating the beacon, watched the battle from a refugee transport. Her people had no words for what they were seeing. The humans fought with a savagery that was simultaneously terrifying and beautiful. They moved through space like creatures born to violence, turning the elegant dance of Vorth formations into a brutal brawl. "They're not civilized at all," whispered one of her assistants. "They fight like animals." "No," Dr. Nethial replied quietly. "They fight like survivors, like beings who have never had the luxury of believing the universe was safe." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vorth fleet had ceased to exist as an organized force. A few ships escaped into hyperspace, but the vast majority were floating debris or radioactive clouds. The humans had lost 7 ships and taken significant damage to others, but their fleet remained intact and combat-ready. Admiral Torres stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed the scattered remains of Vorth resistance. Around him, his crew was already preparing damage reports and casualty lists. This was how humans processed victory, by immediately preparing for the next fight. "Sir," reported Commander Park, "we're receiving communications from Zelani refugee fleets. They're asking permission to approach and thank us." Torres nodded. "Grant permission and Park? Start pulling together intelligence on Vorth home systems. This isn't over. A species that deliberately targets civilians doesn't get to keep existing. Sir, are you sure that's wise? We came here to rescue the Zelani, not start a galactic war." The Admiral looked at the display showing 23 dead worlds, 800 million dead civilians, an entire peaceful civilization nearly erased because they had the misfortune to live on planets the Vorth wanted. "Commander, we didn't start this war, but we're sure as hell going to finish it." Dr. Veltar of the Galactic Council pressed all 4 of his eyes against the analysis viewer, trying to make sense of the data streaming across his laboratory screens. As the Council's chief xenobiologist, he had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. But the beings calling themselves humans defied every principle of civilized evolution he understood. "Computer, replay the battle footage from timestamp 1422-7, he commanded with his melodious voice. The holographic display showed the moment when the human vessel, Wolverine, had deliberately crashed into the Vorth flagship. The explosion had released more energy than most species used to power their entire civilizations for a year. And the humans had done it intentionally. Analysis collision was deliberate, not accidental, the computer confirmed in its neutral tone. Human vessel changed course specifically to intercept Vorth command ship. No attempt at evasive maneuvers detected. Dr. Veltar's tentacles writhed with confusion. In his 3 centuries of studying galactic warfare, he had never seen anything like this. Civilized species fought with precision and elegance. They used advanced tactics and sophisticated weapons. They certainly did not turn their own ships into guided missiles. Computer, display biological analysis of human specimens from intercepted communications. The screen showed anatomical data gathered from human transmissions. The information painted a picture that grew more disturbing with each detail. The humans came from a world they called Earth, located on the dangerous outer rim of the galaxy. Initial analysis suggested it was a Class 2 death world, the most hostile planetary classification possible. Gravity, 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure, 1.2 times standard. Radiation levels, 400% above safe parameters. Seismic activity, constant. Weather patterns, extremely violent. Predator density, maximum possible rating. Dr. Veltar made a sound that his species used to express horror. No wonder the humans fought like madmen. They had evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them every moment of every day. Computer, analyze human combat psychology based on recorded battle communications. The analysis took several minutes. When it finished, Dr. Veltar wished he had never asked the question. Human combat doctrine appears to be based on overwhelming aggression and acceptable loss ratios far exceeding galactic norms. Psychological profile indicates pack-hunting predator mentality with territorial protection instincts. Recommended approach. Extreme caution. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication from the council chambers. Dr. Veltar activated the connection to see the concerned face of council leader Murdak, whose blue skin had turned pale with worry. Dr. Veltar, what can you tell us about these humans? The reports from Zalani space are disturbing. Leader Murdak, I fear we are dealing with something unprecedented. The humans appear to be the first true predator species to achieve spaceflight in recorded galactic history. Predator species. But that's impossible. Predators lack the cooperation necessary for advanced civilization. Dr. Veltar transmitted his analysis to the council chambers. Not these predators, leader. They appear to have evolved cooperative pack-hunting strategies. Instead of competing with each other, they united against external threats. Their entire civilization is built around group survival tactics. Meanwhile, in Vorth space, Emperor Thexnal received reports that shattered his understanding of galactic order. The great crystalline ruler sat on his throne of living diamond, watching holographic displays that showed the complete destruction of Fleet Commander Zexthol's forces. Impossible. His crystalline voice rang through the Imperial chamber. No single species possesses such military capability. Our intelligence indicates the humans have existed in space for less than 2 centuries. How can they field such powerful fleets? General Kevrath, his most experienced military commander, consulted the tactical analysis. Majesty, our surviving ships report that the human vessels appear to be designed specifically for warfare, not adapted for fighting, designed from the beginning as weapons. Their entire industrial base seems to be oriented toward military production. How can this be? What manner of species builds nothing but warships? A species that has never known peace, Majesty. Our intelligence division has gathered fragments of human historical data. They have been at war continuously for their entire recorded history. War with their environment, war with their planet's predators, war with each other, war with neighboring systems. Conflict is their natural state. Emperor Thexnal's crystalline structure darkened with anger. Then we must mobilize the full might of the Imperium. These humans cannot be allowed to interfere with our expansion. Majesty, General Kevrath said carefully, I recommend extreme caution. Our initial engagement suggests the humans possess superior weapons technology and completely alien tactical doctrine. Perhaps negotiation? Never! The Emperor's voice shattered 3 nearby crystal formations. The Imperium does not negotiate with lesser species. Assemble the planet Scorcher fleets. If we cannot conquer the humans quickly, we will simply eliminate their worlds and be done with it. The order went out across Vorth space. Massive vessels designed for planetary bombardment began emerging from hidden shipyards. The Imperium had built these weapons for dealing with rebellious populations. Massive ships armed with weaponry capable of burning away a planet's atmosphere and sterilizing all life. Within days, the planet Scorcher fleets were moving toward human space, carrying enough firepower to eliminate every human world in the galaxy, but the humans were not sitting idle. Admiral Torres had established his command center on the liberated Zalani world of Keftar Prime. The planet's surface still bore the scars of Vorth bombardment, but the survivors were slowly rebuilding with human assistance. More importantly, human engineers were studying Vorth technology and preparing for the next phase of the conflict. Admiral, reported Intelligence Director Commander Sarah Kim, our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive fleet movements in Vorth territory. At least 40 capital ships moving toward our border sectors. Torres studied the tactical projections. The Vorth were escalating, bringing in ships specifically designed for planetary bombardment. The message was clear. If they could not defeat humanity in space, they would simply destroy human worlds from orbit. Recommendations? Sir, we need to hit them before they reach our colonies. But that means taking the fight into Vorth home territory. We're talking about a full-scale invasion of an interstellar empire. Torres looked at the reports from human intelligence teams who had been studying Vorth society. The crystalline beings ruled over dozens of species, maintaining control through fear and overwhelming military superiority. They had never faced serious resistance because they simply destroyed anyone who opposed them. Commander Kim, what's the status of the Prometheus Protocol? Kim's expression grew serious. The Prometheus Protocol was humanity's most closely guarded military secret. During the Hegemony War, human engineers had developed self-replicating manufacturing systems that could turn asteroid fields into weapons platforms. The technology was so dangerous that only a handful of people knew it existed. All systems are ready, Admiral. We can deploy the protocol within 48 hours. Do it. And send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need everything they've got. Every ship, every marine, every weapon system we can spare. Sir, are you sure about this? We're talking about total war against an entire galactic empire. Torres looked out the window at the rebuilt Zilani settlement below. Children who had lost their families were playing in the streets, protected by human security teams. Elderly Zilani who had seen their worlds burn were working alongside human engineers to rebuild their civilization. Commander, the Vorth made this decision when they chose to target civilians. They could have been satisfied with uninhabited worlds. They could have negotiated with the Zilani. Instead, they chose genocide. He turned back to his staff. Now they get to learn what happens when you threaten something humanity decides to protect. The order went out across human space. The largest military mobilization in human history began within hours. Shipyards that had been producing civilian vessels switched to building warships. Reserve fleets that had been mothballed since the Hegemony War were brought back to full operational status. Most significantly, the Ghost Fleet received orders that had not been used since humanity's darkest hour. This is Admiral Torres to all human forces. We face an enemy that believes might makes right, an enemy that destroys civilizations for the crime of existing. Today we show them the price of threatening innocent lives. Today we remind the galaxy why humans are called Deathworlders. Dr. Veltar, monitoring human communications from his laboratory, made an entry in his research log, Day 12 of human military mobilization. The level of coordination and resource allocation being demonstrated suggests this species possesses industrial capacity, far exceeding previous estimates. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic contact to prevent further escalation. But it was too late for diplomacy. The humans had made their decision and the Vorth had made theirs. Two completely different philosophies of existence were about to collide in a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The final battle began in the Vorth home system of Kexthara, where Emperor Thexnal's palace world orbited a massive red giant star. The approaching human fleet was unlike anything seen in galactic history, not just because of its size, but because of what it carried. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the TDF Ragnarok, a massive dreadnought built specifically for this invasion. Around his flagship, over 800 human vessels moved in perfect formation. But the truly terrifying sight was what followed behind them. Dozens of automated factory ships deploying clouds of self-replicating mining drones. Admiral, reported Fleet Engineer Commander Jackson, Prometheus Protocol deployment is complete. We've converted approximately 40% of the system's asteroid belt into weapons platforms. Production rate is exceeding all projections. Torres nodded, watching the tactical display that showed thousands of newly built defense platforms surrounding the human fleet. The Prometheus Protocol had turned dead rocks into a constantly growing wall of firepower. Every hour that passed made the human position stronger. What's the status of the Vorth defenses? Their orbital fortresses are impressive, sir. Massive energy weapons, shield generators that could protect entire planets, but they're designed to stop conventional attacks. They're not equipped to deal with swarm tactics. The Vorth had built their defenses according to traditional galactic warfare principles: elegant formations, concentrated firepower, and the assumption that enemies would fight honorably at long range. They had not considered the possibility of facing an enemy that had no interest in fighting fair. On the surface of Kexthara Prime, Emperor Thexnal watched the approaching human fleet through his palace's crystal viewing chamber. His advisors buzzed around him with reports and recommendations, but the massive crystalline ruler remained silent. For the first time in his 1,000-year reign, he was facing an enemy that seemed genuinely dangerous. "Majesty," whispered General Kevrath, "perhaps we should consider evacuation. The humans have deployed some form of industrial warfare that our analysts cannot counter." "The Emperor does not flee," Thexanal replied, his voice like grinding diamond. "Signal all fleets. Concentrate everything on the human flagship. If we can break their command structure, their primitive pack instincts will collapse. It was a reasonable strategy based on how every other species in the galaxy fought. Cut off the head and the body dies. Unfortunately for the Vorth, humans had learned long ago not to put all their command authority in one place. The first phase of the battle was a masterpiece of human military planning. Instead of charging directly at the Vorth defenses, the human fleet split into dozens of smaller formations. Each group targeted a different orbital platform, using speed and maneuverability to avoid the massive but slow-moving Vorth weapons. Meanwhile, the Prometheus platforms began their real work. Clouds of automated missiles launched from the converted asteroids, each one guided by artificial intelligence that had been programmed with one simple directive: destroy everything that does not transmit human identification codes. The Vorth defenders found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to multiply rather than diminish. Every human ship they destroyed was replaced by 2 more launching from the automated factories. Every platform they eliminated was rebuilt within hours by self-replicating construction drones. This is impossible. General Kevrath transmitted to his surviving ships. How can they maintain such production rates during active combat? The answer was something no Vorth strategist had considered. Humans had been building weapons while fighting wars for their entire history. Their industrial base was designed to operate under attack. Their factories could work while being bombed. Their shipyards could launch vessels while under siege, but the real shock came when the humans did something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Marine. General Patricia Hayes received her orders while aboard the assault ship TDF Leviathan. The massive vessel had been designed specifically for planetary assault, carrying 10,000 of humanity's best soldiers along with enough equipment to conquer worlds. General. Admiral Torres's voice crackled through the communication system. You are authorized to commence ground operations. Primary objective: capture the Vorth Emperor alive. Hayes looked at her senior staff, all of them veterans of the Hegemony War. You heard the Admiral. We're going down to the surface. Colonel Martinez, her tactical officer, studied the briefing data. General, no species in recorded galactic history has ever attempted planetary assault during a space battle. The orbital defenses alone should make landing impossible. Colonel, that's exactly why it's going to work. They won't be expecting it. What happened next would be studied by military historians for millennia. Human Marines launched from their assault ships in armored drop pods, using the chaos of the space battle as cover. The Vorth orbital defenses were focused on the fleet engagement and completely unprepared for an infantry assault. The drop pods crashed through the atmosphere of Kexthera Prime like a meteor shower, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they carried humanity's warriors toward the surface. Most galactic species would have considered this level of atmospheric entry to be suicide. For humans, it was just another day at the office. General Hayes felt her pod slam into the crystalline ground with bone-jarring force. Around her, 10,000 similar impacts marked the landing sites of the largest military assault in galactic history. The Vorth had never faced ground combat, because no species had ever been crazy enough to attempt it during a space battle. All units. Sound off, she commanded through her helmet radio. The responses came in quickly. Despite the brutal landing, casualties were minimal. Human Marines were selected and trained for exactly this kind of operation. Their bodies had been conditioned by Earth's crushing gravity. Their minds prepared for combat in environments that would kill most galactic species. General, reported Captain Rodriguez of Alpha Company. We've got visual on the Imperial Palace. It's about 3 kilometers from our position. No sign of ground defenses. Hayes studied the tactical display on her helmet's heads-up system. The Vorth had built their capital city like a work of art, with graceful spires of living crystal reaching toward the sky. Beautiful, but completely unprepared for military assault. All companies advance on the palace. Rules of engagement: avoid civilian casualties, but anyone shooting at you is fair game. The advance through the Crystal City was unlike anything in galactic military history. Vorth civilians fled in terror as armored humans marched through streets never designed for warfare. The few Vorth security forces they encountered were completely unprepared for close-quarters combat. Most galactic species fought at long range with energy weapons. The concept of soldiers closing to physical proximity was alien to them. When human Marines kicked down the palace doors and stormed through corridors with kinetic weapons, The Vorth guard simply had no response. Emperor Thexnel was found in his throne room, surrounded by a handful of loyal guards who had never fired a weapon in anger. When General Hayes and her assault team burst through the crystal doors, the ancient ruler's first instinct was to negotiate. "Stop," he commanded, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. "I am Emperor Thexnal, ruler of 40 star systems. I demand to speak with your leader." Hayes removed her helmet, revealing a scarred face that had seen too many battles. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am General Patricia Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. By the authority of Admiral Torres and the Terran government, you are under arrest for war crimes against civilian populations." "War crimes? I do not understand this concept." "Then let me explain," Hayes replied, signaling her Marines to secure the chamber. "You ordered the deliberate targeting and murder of 800 million innocent beings. In human law, that makes you a war criminal. In human justice, that means you face trial and execution." The Emperor's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. But they were inferior species. They existed only to serve the Imperium. And that attitude is exactly why your empire is about to cease existing. The capture of Emperor Thexnal marked the effective end of Vorth resistance. With their absolute ruler in human custody and their fleets shattered, the remaining Vorth forces began surrendering across the galaxy. The war that the Emperor had expected to end in easy victory had instead resulted in the complete destruction of his empire. In the aftermath, the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. Dr. Veltar of the Galactic Council published his report on the human species, warning that the galaxy now contained predators whose capabilities far exceeded anything previously known. "The beings known as humans," he wrote, "represent a fundamental challenge to our understanding of civilized behavior. They possess industrial capacity exceeding that of most galactic empires, military doctrine based on total warfare concepts, and most significantly, an absolute refusal to accept the targeting of civilian populations." The report continued. Recommendation: immediate establishment of diplomatic relations with human leadership. Under no circumstances should any galactic civilization attempt military action against human interests without full understanding of the consequences.